You're watching the World News live on France 24, and it's time for some culture on the programme because the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature has been announced this afternoon. It's gone to the French author Annie Ernaux, whose novels draw on her own experiences of gender and class. Today, she described the award as an honour and a responsibility. She's one of just 17 women to have won the award since the Nobel first came into existence in 1901. And joining me now in the studio is McCrum. She's the programme's manager at the American Library here in Paris. Thanks for coming in, Alice. Just tell us, first of all, a bit more about Annie Ernaux.
Yeah, so she's French. Of course, so the French are absolutely delighted. She grew up in Normandy in the north of France. She was born to a working class family, and so much of her literature grapples, as you say, with this idea of class and finding her place. I mean, she has an early novel called La Place. How does she fit into her place and her family, and then in the literary world more broadly?
So tell us about that then. How does she fit into the history of the Nobel Literature Prize itself?
Yeah, so I think at a kind of first glance, one way to think about past winners is to think about them either winning for their social political engagement or for their stylistic achievement. So for social political engagement, a kind of obvious person who comes to mind is somebody like Toni Morrison, who wins the prize in 1993 for her interrogation of the essential aspect of America. More recently, though, in terms of stylistic achievement, we think of people like Canada's Alice Munro, America's Louise Gluck. So these are short story writers, poets. I think Annie Ernaux puts pressure on this boundary between the social, political, and then the stylistic, because she's really grappling with all of it in her writing.
And now, what's interesting about the Nobel Prize for Literature is there's no shortlist, is there, like there is for some other literary prizes. So what do we know about the way the Academy works and how it makes its decision?
Sure, there is an internal shortlist and long list, but we're not privy to it. Right. And so this is really interesting because the Academy prides itself on its independence, both geographically. So what we can say is that possibly Sweden is not really at the epicenter of the publishing literary world. They're also financially independent, so they rely on an internal endowment, whereas you think about other literary prizes where there are sponsors, where there's monetary interest at stake. And so much of what happens, we don't know what happens, essentially.
And what does winning a prize like this, I mean, there's a lot of money involved, isn't there? What does that mean for the authors who get it?
There's an enormous amount of money. And I think a good point of comparison is the Goncourt. So the Goncourt, which will be announced in a month's time, the winner will win €10. I mean, it's essentially just...
This is France's biggest literary prize.
This is France's biggest literary prize. So what will they win? I mean, they'll win money, they'll win prestige. It's almost like the final feather on their cap because it's often awarded to somebody at the end of their life because it's acknowledging their whole body of work. What's really important to highlight too is that the work will be translated. So if, of course, Ernaux's writing exists in French and English and Spanish, etc., but more obscure languages, let's say, it will be translated in those languages. So it really elevates her to a global level of readership and knowledge.
And as I told you before we went on air, I'm embarrassed to say I've never read any of Annie Ernaux, so it's inspiring me, at least, to give her books a go.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Alice McCrum. It's nice to talk to you today.
Lovely. Thank you.